My name is Nikki McCrae. I am a veterinarian out of Lions Veterinary Hospital in Summit. And I am here tonight to present to the parents of our school district and beyond about how dogs communicate and what kids and their parents should know. We're calling this presentation From Wags to Warnings. And bear with me because the presentation view is looking different with the screen sharing. There we go. All right, so our introduction to dog statistics. So understanding the importance of safety for children around dogs is essential, as most American homes have more than one dog. There are 94 million homes in the United States that have a pet, not just a dog. 68 million homes in the United States have dogs. And over half of the homes in the United States have an average of 1.6 dogs. So that's most houses that you're going to go to are going to have at least one dog, if not two. So that's, most places where we're going to be going to with our kids or without them. And then understanding the importance of safety for children around dogs is essential also because a significant number of bites occur in familiar settings with familiar dogs. There are 4.5 million reported dog bites in the United States each year. In my experience as a veterinarian, I am well aware that there are absolutely dog bites that go unreported, and I unfortunately do see those situations when families come to discuss situations with me. So this is 4.5 million dog bites that are reported. Of those reported dog bites, 77% of them occur from a family or a friend's dog. So that's not just the dog that we see walking down the street or when we're at the park with our kids. This is dogs that you have probably met before and are part of your lives. And then 32% of fatal dog bites involve people 24 and under. So that's our kids. And, this is a statistic focusing on fatal dog bites, which are not the majority, but of fatal situations, that's happening primarily in children. So again, just these statistics can be pretty shocking and are big numbers. So they are, hopefully nobody watching this presentation has, situations associating, with dog attacks or bites between dogs and children. But the statistics tell us that there's likely people listening to this that have had experiences, unfortunately. So kind of the primary focus of my presentation is what are these common misconceptions that we are raised and taught and teaching our kids to be aware of, and how can we change, our perception and our understanding of these things so that our kids can be safer around dogs. These big misconceptions, people telling you that their dog is friendly. When you meet people at the park or on walks, anywhere, around the neighborhood, and they insist, like, my dog is friendly, come on over, come say hi. But that is not always the case. A dog that lives with kids must be good with kids is a really, cautious assumption to be making when our kids are going on play dates or visiting families' houses and things along those lines. And then the wagging tail. We are always told that, the dog's wagging its tail. That means we can come and say hi, and it's looking for interactions, but that is not always the case. So here we go into diving into why these things, are not what they seem, and how can we protect our kids when those basic fundamental things that most of us are taught are not actually true. And what it comes down to is really learning to speak dog. Understanding dog behavior allows us to keep ourselves and our children safe around dogs. I left this little blurb in while I was putting this presentation together, just trying to get feelers for the general, what society kind of understands in the information that we're given. And Google, unfortunately, did not disappoint. This is what Google AI has to say about the importance of dog and child safety. So recognizing and interpreting dog body language is essential for ensuring safe interactions between dogs and children. And of course, that's true. And then Google tells us key signs to watch for include a wagging tail indicating happiness, a tucked tail showing fear, and growling or baring teeth as signs of aggression. So let's dive into that a little bit. So that common misconception, a wagging tail is a happy dog. It's arguably the most dangerous myth that so many of us are taught. I have a video in here that's a little bit of a dramatic example of this to drive the point home. But if you focus on this dog's tail, I think anybody watching this video would agree that this is not a dog that they would continue to approach. But his tail is absolutely wagging the whole time. So here we go. All right, so that's Noche. He's actually a lovely boy outside of intentionally being scared for this video. So my apologies to Noche for that. But you could see throughout every bit except for about 2 seconds of that video, his tail is wagging, but he obviously does not want this interaction to continue. And I wouldn't blame him if he was continued to be approached that he escalates to biting someone because he's giving everything he can to tell you to stop coming. And then Google tells us a tucked tail showing fear, which is true, and then growling or baring teeth, which I hope to everybody is an obvious and end stage sign of developing aggression. But it's the only thing that Google and many people will tell you to watch out for, right? When the dog starts growling or showing its teeth, we obviously need to back away. But we are missing a lot of signs before a dog will get to those points. And that's the bread and butter of this whole presentation. We have a ladder of aggression in dogs, and the value of these really subtle signs of fear, anxiety, and stress long before we get up to behaviors, that really constitute as aggression. So in this ladder of aggression, you can see down at the bottom where we're in the green, a dog is going to start yawning, licking its nose or licking its lips. It's going to turn its head away. Those are the first things a dog is going to do when it's uncomfortable. And it's some things that dogs are going to do in so many situations, right? So that's why this is green. It's not telling us that we have to stop immediately what we're doing, but the dog is very clearly telling us, hey, I really am not appreciating this. I think I would like it to stop. And if we proceed continuing to do what we're doing or continue escalating in whatever behavior we're trying to get the dog to do with us, then they'll start turning away. They'll try walking away. They'll creep, meaning like they'll almost like crawl. They'll be kind of slouched in how they're moving around. Their ears will go back. What's not specified in this ladder is showing the whites of the eyes. So unlike people, where we always see the white parts of our eyes, we don't have that in dogs. You're only seeing the colored iris and pupils in a dog's face when they're relaxed. So if you're approaching a dog and they have a stiff body language, their ears go back, and they're kind of flashing the white parts of their eyes while their head's turning away from you. That's called whale eyeing, and those are very, very clear indications the dog is asking for space. And we're creeping into this, yellow to orange phase of the ladder of aggression. And then if we continue to push that boundary when the dog is asking for space, they'll continue to move up. They'll get more stiff. Their hackles may go up, like the hair on the back of their neck or down their spine may go up. And then we start getting into those true what we think of aggressive states where we're growling, we're showing our teeth, then we may snap, and then we may bite, which is making contact to skin. Um, the big thing to consider with the ladder of aggression is that dogs, just like people, are learning all the time. So what can happen when dogs are living in our homes and we're not noticing or respecting these early signs of discomfort, fear, anxiety, stress, then they learn to skip. They learn to jump stairs. So if every time the dog puts its ears back and um, crouches away and shows the whites of its eyes, that the interactions continue and nobody's ever really listening to those cues from the dog, then the dog learns that, okay, well, when I actually escalate all the way up to snapping, 100% of the time people move away. So those subtle signs of putting my ears back, trying to walk away, showing you the whites of my eyes lose all their value if every time they're used, they aren't respected. So the dog goes from turning its head away to snapping instead of all of these other little steps that we could be seeing. And then we end up with the dog that bites out of nowhere. In my experience as a veterinarian, unfortunately, it is the typical story if a family is bringing a dog into my practice due to bite incidences that are leading to some really hard decisions for the family. They almost always are describing it as a bite out of nowhere. It's not as common for families to come to me and say that, we've been noticing these really subtle signs that, Fluffy has been uncomfortable for a few years, and over time he just stopped showing us those subtle signs and now he bites us. Really what is happening is a lot of people were never taught to know these little subtle signs and to respect them. And so some dogs will never escalate, right? Some will stay low on the ladder regardless of what we put them through, whereas others will only tolerate so much over just their first few months home. And some will tolerate things for years and years, and then they're 8 years old or 9 years old, and all of a sudden they're biting. But an 8-year-old dog might be, starting to experience arthritis and can't explain that to us. So what was once tolerated is no longer tolerated. And those subtle signs are ignored, so we escalate. Um, all this to say that, when we're more aware of these really subtle signs, we can better equip ourselves and our children to respect these early signs so that dogs and kids can build better trusting relationships with one another so that the dog doesn't feel the need to escalate on the ladder. So I hope all that makes sense. And then I'm going to show you some little examples. So on these pictures, of the top picture, that's my own dog and kids. That's Mouse, the pit bull. She's a lovely dog, but you can see just in these two pictures, the one on the left with my son in the race car, Lightning McQueen shirt, she's very comfortable. She really is always quite comfortable with him. But you can see her ears are up. She's got a nice relaxed facial expression, and she's just comfortable with him. And then on the other side with my daughter, Mouse and my daughter have never quite gotten along. Mouse has always been uncomfortable with her. I don't know why, but that's just the way that it is. Every dog does not need to like every person or every dog, just like we don't like everybody that we meet. But Mouse does not like my daughter. So this picture I took specifically for this presentation. It's not a type of picture that I usually would capture, or a situation where I would stop to take a picture, but many, many, many people do. After this presentation, if you're looking at pictures, scrolling on your social media or even on news channels, what is portrayed as cute interactions between dogs and children oftentimes make me cringe when, being aware of these really subtle indicators of discomfort. So you could see how in this picture with Mouse and my daughter, her ears are back. She was licking her lips and yawning, but I didn't capture that in that moment of the picture. Again, I don't want this interaction to continue, so we took the picture and we moved on quite quickly. And I said to my daughter, "All right, see, Mouse is actually quite uncomfortable. Her ears are back. Her body's really stiff. She really wants some space." So I called Mouse away. As you could see, my daughter was laying on a blanket. Mouse actually invited herself into this space, but then found herself uncomfortable. So I moved her away. And then we could see, even though these are early signs on that ladder, it's so valuable to show the dog, hey, I see that, I hear you, and I'm going to respect it, because then the dog doesn't have to escalate up that ladder. Here's videos. So in this video, you could see Rue. It's a little bit hard to tell exactly what I'm trying to show you until we see the counterpart video. So here we go. Here's Rue again. So you can see in this video with Rue, her tail's wagging, her body's loose, her whole, back and butt are wiggling around with her. She's moving really comfortably compared to the previous video. That body, you could see that body is really stiff. She's keeping her head down. She's creeping or crouching a little bit, but her tail is still wagging. And again, that's why I never want to focus on a tail being an indicator of a dog we want to approach. But two very different ways that Rue's body is moving there. Uncomfortable dog versus comfortable dog. Again, just showing that ladder. So she's creeping up into the orange where she's crouched. Her tail does start to tuck under. And obviously, dogs, just like people, while there's lots of body language that they offer, there's every situation in life where they're going to offer that body language. This presentation is focused on dogs and kids, but this is Rue trying, the owner telling her to drop something that she's not supposed to be holding. And Rue doesn't want to drop that. So she's showing that in her body language. She's saying, I don't want to do it, but I also know that you're asking me to, and I will. And she does. And then she recovers and she moves on, right? Just like our kids, if we tell them, like, you can't have another cookie, they don't want to listen to that, but usually they will. So all of these different indicators is all normal, healthy, natural behaviors that dogs are going to show us, and they're never bad, right? Even if we start creeping into, the oranges and the reds, like, that's not a dog being bad. That's a dog just trying to communicate with us with the language that they have. And we just need to find ways to help them come back down the ladder when they are escalating to a level that we're not comfortable with. So teaching children how to approach dogs, while proper techniques can promote safe interactions with dogs, listening to body language should always be the focus. But when we're at a place where a dog is comfortable and we are going to approach them, we want to ask the owner for permission. We want to ensure the dog is comfortable, the owner's present, and then as parents, being prepared with, little scripts in our mind, asking the owner for permission. Red flags go off in my mind because some owners will tell you, my dog's friendly, come on over, and the dog may not actually be very comfortable. Again, because a lot of people, and most of us, are just not taught how to hear the dog's language. So being equipped as a parent to say, oh, it's so nice that, you're letting us come say hi to your dog, but, to your son or daughter, we could see that Fluffy's ears are back, their body is kind of stiff, and they're licking their lips. So they're actually asking us not to say hi today. So maybe next time we'll say hi, and we move on. Approaching slowly and calmly. So always want to encourage a relaxed demeanor to avoid startling the dog, right? If your kid's really excited or if you're really excited, and we're coming, up to a dog with loud voices or jumping around, then again, being ready to redirect your child. I see you're having a hard time controlling how excited you are because this is really exciting. Why don't we go do some monkey bars for a little bit and try to say hi to the dog later when we're ready to be a little bit calmer? Because we don't want to scare the dog. Letting the dog sniff your hand before petting. And with that, always approaching from under the chin. We don't want to reach over a dog's head. That can be really intimidating to a lot of dogs. So teaching our kids to go under the chin for sniffs and let the dog approach us. If the dog sniffs and then moves away, then Fluffy doesn't want to be pet right now. We can try again later. If the dog sniffs and leans in, okay, the dog's looking for some interaction. And then lastly, avoiding direct eye contact in dog language that can be perceived as a threat. So trying to avoid that too. And cultivating healthy family relationships. There are so many benefits of bonding with dogs. It's a positive experience that encourages children to develop empathy, responsibility, and caretaking. Engaging with dogs helps children learn to communicate and understand nonverbal cues, and fostering a nurturing environment. And those nonverbal cues, I think it's, again, the bread and butter of why I'm here is that it's not something that we naturally do. We don't know the nonverbal cues for dogs, and our children do not naturally know them. So being able to put words to what you're seeing with those subtle cues and saying them out loud to your kids is so powerful. And then risks of neglecting safety. So of course, neglecting safety between dogs and kids can have serious consequences. Obviously, bites and injuries, but even escalations to uncomfortable levels. Right, a growling dog, a snapping dog, can lead to a lot of tensions in the home and fear that kids can carry for the rest of their lives, and trauma that dogs can also carry for the rest of their lives. So again, just trying to listen to those subtle cues so that we can build positive, harmonious relationships in the home. Safe play practices with dogs. So supervising all interactions. So this little infographic comes from a great website that has lots of good resources. The link will be at the end of the presentation as well. But this particular one is going over types of supervision. So how we can be proactive and active parents in homes with children and dogs, making sure that all of our interactions are supervised and controlled. We have barriers, we have cues, ways to make sure that there aren't unsupervised accidents in the home. Absent supervision is just allowing the children and the dogs to have free roam in the home. And really, when we have kids that are, not yet of teenage age, and even then, that's where we can fall into a lot of risk factors, because dogs and kids can be unpredictable. And then passive supervision, that could look a little bit like me taking that picture of my daughter, right? The dog comes and approaches her on the couch, and I may be not in the room, I may be doing something else, and then that comes into reactive, right? And then I come in and move the dog when I notice that this is happening, but we try our best in our home to ensure that the dogs and the kids are never just inadvertently left in a space where there's not an adult. Because you never know. And we want to make sure, again, fostering those good relationships when our kids are young. And then teaching respect for space. So that's just going back to, that ladder of aggression, those subtle behavioral cues. Teaching your kids. I can't emphasize enough verbalizing these little cues so that your kids learn to pick up on them. When my son was barely 3, we went to his grandmother's house. He walked in the door. He loves dogs. He immediately goes to approach the dog. Again, a dog that, he's 2. This is grandma's house. He's known this dog since he was born. And he went to approach her. Her ears were back, and she was looking a little bit tense. And halfway to approaching her, he muttered to himself, not even to one of the adults in the room, "Oh, her ears are back today. I'll say hi later." And then redirected himself to the room with the toys. So kids, they learn, right? They learn just like they learn all of the subtle things with how we interact. They're little sponges, and any parent watching this knows that. So, not verbalizing our dog's language is a missed opportunity. And then using toys for play. We don't really, I would never recommend that, your dogs and your kids chase each other around, because that's just, kind of creeping into, borderline things that can start to stray into inappropriate interactions. So just encouraging toys for play. And then I have a little video of my guys here, if it'll work. Yeah, so that's them just playing tug of war, and a little example of what, healthy play looks like in our house, and then how to handle dog bites. Um, oh, I moved away. Here we go. So remaining calm as possible, right? It's very stressful, very scary if you ever find yourself in a situation like this, but trying to keep yourself calm for the child and the dog, that can help, reduce further escalation of a situation that's happening. Easier said than done, of course. Assessing the injury, so determining the severity of the bite, checking for bleeding, puncture wounds, infection, and then from there, seeking medical attention. So depending on who you ask, you'll get different information about this. I think that regardless of the severity of the bite, you should always at least touch base with your pediatrician or your doctor. I've seen bites, cause really significant infections even a week after it has happened. But of course, if it's bite, it's deep, if the bite is deep or bleeding, then you should be going to emergency room or an urgent care. But you should always be touching base with a doctor. And then what's often missed is reporting the incident to authorities. So any of your local authorities, your animal control, even, you could go through a police station and they'll make sure to put, a report to the right people. But you never know if you're the first incident or the 20th incident with a dog. And unfortunately, and I understand, I am absolutely the type of person to give people the benefit of the doubt, but you just never know how many incidences a dog has had previously. And if it's not getting reported, then, measures aren't being taken to help protect, other people, our environment, our neighborhood, to prevent future occurrences. When we talk about the statistics of things like fatal dog bites and really significant situations, almost always those are happening in dogs that have had previous bite incidences. Just like our ladder of these cues and our ladder of aggression, a dog isn't usually going to, unless it has something medically wrong with it, which is quite rare as a reason for a dog to bite someone. It's not typical for them to bite with intent to harm. So a dog that's causing significant harm or causing a fatality almost always has had an incident of a bite before, where that bite, right, just like our subtle cues, if they're not respected, the dog climbs that ladder, our bites become more forceful and more significant the more times the dog feels the need to escalate to that level. So always, always, always report the incident. And then lastly, here's just some links. So some family resources. Family Paws and The Family Dog are two fantastic resources. The Family Dog website has nice stuff for even kids. They both have podcasts, Instagrams, YouTubes, with a whole lot of information. So great resources for all families. And then your pediatrician, your veterinarian, dog trainers, are all good resources in the community.